Yeah, welcome to Deep Drinks Podcast. We already have a bunch of people here. This is great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kip, for coming on again. It's always great to have you on. I was saying just before, I feel relaxed when you're here because I feel like we're genuine friends and
buddies.
I just learn so much.
And you're not going to make fun of my nerdy headphones.
They're the same as mine. That's almost a diss because they're similar to mine.
I guess they feel like this big. Like when I'm wearing them, I feel like I can't fit through the door, right? So
yeah. So there's a couple of things I want to first start with. This is also streaming up to your audience. And so welcome everyone. This is a regular Deep Drinks episode, but this is the second episode. Yeah, so we just decided just as we started,
because we can do that.
Yeah. Cool, and right? So I just wanted to so this is the second episode to a part one that we've already done on creation stories in context, early Israelite religions, which is part of the course you did for MVP courses. Link in the description. Mm-hmm. You can sign up if you want to get the full version. And that is part of a class that you taught at university. So we're really getting like the gold mine of the juicy stuff here, which is really cool.
The pewter standard.
A what?
No, sorry. I was like, no. It was you said gold, and I'm like, well, no, it's more like the pewter standard.
Yeah, you're right. I only know about pewter because I tried to buy a really fancy flask for a friend of mine, and I was like, what? And they're like, oh, you get a pewter one. I was like, what is a pewter? Anyway, so I kind of understand what you're talking about. It's a type
I'm
of
not
metal,
entirely sure what pewter is, but when I was a kid, I loved it.
What do you mean, just the metal?
Yeah, but it's I think it's a special kind of steel. I think. Yeah, I don't know.
I think they stopped using them because people got you get lead poisoning or something.
Oh, really?
You get yeah. That's why they don't make pewter ones anymore.
Whoops! Don't do that anymore. Okay.
Anyway, it's off to a great start. Well, first of all, I'm drinking coffee today, and we're not drinking. Well, I'm not drinking booze. Are you drinking booze?
We'll see how far we get, but I'm starting with a President's Choice cola, which is from Superstore here in Canada, because pop's expensive. So, but if when I'm done my Coke and I'm still thirsty, I've also got this, which is like it's called Wild Turkey Long Branch Kentucky Straight Bourbon, and it was quite expensive. And the reason I have it is because I'm just coming back, I guess like a week and a half ago now. We just got back from a nice holiday to the interior, hung out with some friends. I did some mountain biking. David, it was the first time I was on my mountain bike in almost a year. So I had an amazing holiday. But anyways, we stopped in this little
first of all, was that hard to like get back? Like were you sore?
Oh my God. So the worst part was the cardio, right? Like there was going up that first day, going up the hills, I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to pass out a couple of times just because it was so hard. But the other amazing thing is that by day 2, like I wasn't like, up to my usual shape. I'll probably need a few more days, but I felt like I was crushing it already. Right?
It's weird because I've been on long rides before. I used to be really fit on a bike. Obviously, I haven't done it for a while now, but when I've been on long rides again, I'll be like, I'm gonna pass out at the start of the day. I'm like, I actually like have stopped and like I need to like have a breather because I'm gonna pass out. And by the end of the day, I'm like, fine. It's so weird. Like your body like remembers or something.
Right? Yes.
But well,
the bad part on that second day was that when I was coming down the hill, my back tire hit like a rock that was shaped like this, and it literally sliced it in half. Like it was crazy. I never had a blowout like that before. So I had to buy a new tire, which is so stupid. The tire that I wanted at the bike shop that was the match for my front tire, you'll never guess how much it cost.
Well, I think I saw this on a stream.
Oh, oh yeah, okay. No, so that's not that you're cheating.
It was but I forgot. It was expensive, right? It was like
$150.
Yeah.
It's a bicycle tire. A bicycle tire. Like my kid's car. We put tires on his car.
Mate.
Like and they were cheaper than that.
When we bought our stroller, our like pram, I don't know what they're called, like the thing that you push babies around in.
Yeah.
It was more expensive than my car. Like I was like, how? Like not my recent car, but like I'm like, how on earth does this cost more than a car? Anyway, so they're expensive.
They are, but I have to finish the story here because Stacy said, you were near me. Yes. So we stopped in Lumbee. Stacy knows where Lumbee is. I like to call it Lumpy. But we stopped in Lumbee for gas and to get some stuff from the grocery store. And my wife wanted to get some coolers from the liquor store. And I said, well, just go in and buy me like a bottle of wild turkey. Because it's like water, right? Like it's everywhere. Yeah. You can get you could get a wild turkey in Australia. I have no doubt. Yeah. Right? Like it's ubiquitous.
It's everywhere.
So she comes out of the liquor store and she's got this. And I'm like, what the hell is that?
It's brown.
Says it's you'll see that up on the top there. Oh. It does say wild turkey. And she just asked them. She went to the counter and she said, my husband wants a bottle of wild turkey. And they gave her this and then charged her like twice as much as what it costs like for a normal bottle.
Is it good though?
It's fine. Like I thought it was going to be amazing considering it's twice as expensive as wild turkey, but it's a well, I'll read it here. It's Kentucky straight bourbon. It says oak and Texas mesquite charcoal refined. And it's a small batch. So, but it's it's nice.
That's where the money comes. Right. If you get those small batches, they're not necessarily any better, but because they're limited, you know. Well, something I did want to cheers before we started is we got a bit of a celebration because we just passed 6,000 subscribers on Deep Drinks. So that's like a really awesome like accomplishment. I'm really stoked with that. I'm so happy that people are liking the show. But also we got 1 million views. Like it just passed 1 million views.
I don't have 1 million views.
Well, it's mostly because I posted that clip. I think mostly because I have this program that creates shorts from everything and then posts them every day. So I'm getting like a few thousand every day from shorts. But I also I think 1/4 of those views, maybe more, is from the clip I pulled out of the conversation with Matt Delahunty talking about Jordan Peterson. So we have Jordan Peterson's notoriety or fan boys who clicked on the video to thank for that. So thank you everyone. Million subscribers, million views is really awesome.
Thank you, Jordan Peterson.
Thank you, Jordan Peterson. Bless. So that's Cheers to that. So I'm really stoked with that. It's been really awesome. And thanks to everyone who subscribes, who super chats, everything. It's really it means a lot.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Before we jump into this this excellent lesson, I need to ask, because I've kind of stayed on the fringes of this, but there seems to be like a beef between yourself and actually not even between yourself, between Bible
scholarship.
Scholars, between scholarship and one Ammon Hillman, I think his name is.
Yes.
Can you so as far as I understand, Ammon Hillman is a crazy. He runs the channel Lady. He comes across like that. he comes across like that. I remember the only thing I knew about Ammon is he had a channel. I was really excited to watch an episode with yourself and Ammon together. And you both jumped in, and before you could even really talk, he said that, and I quote, "I think you're full of shit, Kip, and I'm going to expose you." And it was just meant to be a friendly conversation. And I was so shocked. And then after that, he's like smelling his shirt, biting his nails. I was like, is this guy on drugs? I took screenshots and I sent it to some of the people who were on the panel. I was like, I think he was on drugs. You left the conversation, right? You left because you're like,
it's the one and only time I've ever done that.
Yeah. So I was like, whoa. So that's the only information I had of Ammon. And then all of a sudden, my dad reaches out and he's like, "Have you heard of Ammon Hillman?" I'm like, "Oh my!" And it's because he went on that popular person's YouTube channel. I didn't actually watch the interview.
Danny Jones.
Oh yeah, but in the background, I'm just hearing a lot of whispers. There seems to be a war on the rising. And I just wanted to. I know you've made a stream about him. I watched a little bit of it. I watched a little bit of his stream. Both, incredibly. Actually, yours wasn't incredibly frustrating, but no, actually, yeah, the whole situation is very frustrating. But could you just give us a recap? What's happening?
So, I mean, I don't know if anything's happening. I mean, Ammon Hillman made this appearance on the Danny Jones podcast that got like 350,000 views in a week, right? And he says all sorts of crazy garbage, which is his whole thing. His whole thing is that so he's a classicist, which means that he has done his training in Greek literature, and I believe he specialized in medical texts. And there's tons and tons of them, right? Like the corpus of Greek literature is vast, like it's huge. So I don't begrudge classicists for getting lost in it. I just wish they would stay there, which is something that a number of them don't do, and he's one of them. So he's got this idiotic idea that the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which may have been composed as early as like 250 BCE, his idea is that the text was originally Greek, that the Septuagint was the original text, and that the Hebrew Bible, as we have it, was based on manuscripts that were retroverted or back translated from Greek into Hebrew, which is patented nonsense. And I mean, it's easy to show, right? Like that was the whole point, that one and only appearance that I had with him on the Gnostic Informants show like a year ago. It was supposed to be his 100K sub celebration, the one that you were talking about, the one and only show I showed up on with him. We were supposed to discuss this issue, which came first, the Septuagint or the Hebrew text. And yeah, so he was super rude and condescending, and said a bunch of.
It was like abrupt, like it was abrupt. Like I'm not one to, I have family members and history of drug abuse and things like that. Like I'm not pointing the finger or saying that anyone's a bad person, but like I very much got like, this guy's high vibes from it. He might not have been. He definitely might not have been, but he's just the way, it was very sporadic, very aggressive, and then he was pacing back and forth, chewing his nails, sniffing his shirt multiple times within like a few minutes, and I was just like, what's going on here? Like
and he wasn't listening either, right? Like this is the thing that ticks me off, is he's
and
not
again, let me
listening.
just say, he might not have been on drugs, and so I'm just putting that out there.
I don't know, he was being a douche, whether he was high or not.
And that's fact,
right? So, and then I found out that he doesn't even know, like, his Greek is great, as well. Even then, like, he's got these weird, because he's immersed in these medical texts, he's transposing, how words will take on meanings in certain contexts. Like this happens in any language, right?
Yeah. So if I say like I'm flying down the road,
sure,
I'm driving, I'm flying down the road, people
exactly
can understand.
I think a really good example of this is if you've ever read like a legal document, right? It uses English words that don't mean the same thing as they do in conversation.
Yeah.
So he's immersed in these medical texts, and then he's taking the meanings of words that appear in these medical texts and applying those to everything. So, for example, where the Greek word for anointed one, which is the Hebrew word Mashiach, is Christos, which is the word from which we get Christ. It's Jesus the Messiah, right? Jesus the anointed one. So it comes from a verb that means to rub or to apply some sort of ritual implement on your body. So like it's an appropriate word to use for translating something like Mashiach, which means anointed one. But within these Greek medical texts, it means to apply some sort of drugs to the eyes to achieve this for healing or for enlightenment or something, right? So he takes that meaning, transposes that into these Hellenistic Jewish texts of like the New Testament, and then back into the Septuagint, and goes, well, Jesus was a drug pusher. And I'm like, no, he fucking wasn't. Like, it's not. So, but I found out in this stream that he doesn't know any other ancient language. Well, he probably knows some Latin too. He knows Latin, he knows Greek, he knows nothing about Hebrew, nothing about Aramaic, nothing about any Semitic or any other ancient Near Eastern language. And when it comes to making textual comparisons between the Greek text of the Septuagint and the Hebrew Bible texts, and trying to and if you're in the process of determining which one of these was original in the translation, it's pretty damn important to know both languages. And if you don't, you can't make that judgment. I happen to know both languages, and I happen to understand why, the many, many, many reasons why we are absolutely certain that the Septuagint is a translation of these Greek originals. So so that was
is it kind of the case of when you're a screwdriver, everything's a screw? Like you just kind of like, he's immersed in the medical text, he's immersed in Greek stuff, and he's starting to see these little like connections here and there, and he draws one of those. Have you seen that? There's that meme of like a million like lines between different things on the wall, and the guy's like, I found it's I don't know, I'm explaining the meme poorly, but it's like this huge diagram of different like points that are all like coming together, and like you can't point to one specific thing. You have to take the huge amount of what I might say cherry pick resources to kind of find the what he's kind of getting at. Is that?
No, I think that's a pretty good analogy. I think you're basically on track with I think that's probably pretty similar to what he's doing. So yeah, so I mean, Dan made a couple of because Hillman absolutely hates me, he absolutely hates Dan. So Dan did a couple of his short little video responses to Hillman's nonsense, and I had actually, when I first saw this interview, I had suggested to the Diablo Critics group that maybe this is something we wanted to take a look at for our June episode, but then Dan went ahead and you know,
he said no.
No, well, he just went ahead and made his own. So I'm like, oh well, I'll just make mine, then we'll do something else. So, but don't worry about it. I have something planned.
There's so much to talk about.
Oh yeah. So, anyways, that's Ammon Hillman.
It's one of those things that you know, you get someone I don't know, like who goes on Joe Rogan and says that like something like mushrooms come from my cock or something just absolutely out there, you know what I mean? And then everyone will be like, whoa, like I can't believe it, like mushrooms come from this guy's cock. Like they'll have some, you know, some like bizarre theory, and that's what will get attention, especially people use big words or engaging in kind of areas that they explain to their audience, but in a way that their audience isn't equipped to kind of correctly discern. Like they don't have the training to know whether or not someone's pulling the wool over their eyes or anything. We actually have a comment from Pat Lowinger. Here we go again with Dr. Davis acting like a shield for big academia and keeping down the groundbreaking research of someone like Hillman. Open up your eyes, people, at Kip Davis. And we also have a $5 super chat. Thank you for the $5 super chat from Milwaukee Atheist. We picked up a book from Hillman like 6 months ago. Lots of claims and not a single citation. That is a bummer.
Figure.
I really hate when people do that. Like atheist books I've read do the same thing. They'll like quote some, or anyone, they'll quote some like really profound point and then not give a source. And you're like, you need a source, like for a point like this.
Yeah, you do, right? Yeah. So,
what is with my analogy, by the way? That was a PSA. Yeah. Anyway, apologies for that. So let's jump into. That's enough of Hillman. And let's jump into some scholarship.
So
let's jump.
This is part 2, right? Do you remember the last stream? What did you learn in the last stream, David, in a few sentences?
Well, I actually watched it again last night.
Oh,
first thing I learned is everyone got really mad at me for trying to inject Jesus too much into the Old Testament. That's the main thing that stands out. But obviously, like the things like the maybe you can give a bit of a recap. But things like the garden wasn't necessarily a garden. It was it could have been more like the gardens of Babylon. And
it's an urban masterpiece.
An urban masterpiece, yeah. So could you give us a little bit of a recap?
That was one of the big ones. The it's a totally different story, a separate story from the creation myth in Genesis chapter 1, and we see some distinct differences. It's earlier than Genesis chapter 1, and Genesis chapter 1 actually is probably in some respects responding to or expanding upon things that are taking place within this story that it wants to correct or to elaborate or to change even, right? So that's important. We see, there's different focuses and different emphases in this particular story. I suggested that the real focal point of the story is the creation of this being, the Adam, and it fixates on his creation in 3 aspects. Fixates on the Adam as a farmer who was created essentially to be enslaved to the ground as a worker of the garden. He was an oblate, essentially, tasked with looking after this urban masterpiece, the Garden of God in Eden. And he was a herdsman. He was given all these animals with the purpose for help. And I think we finished up on this point, if you'll remember, that the animals were made essentially to provide some muscle and assistance in helping him to in his mandate to look after the Garden of God. And as we'll get into a little bit today, because the other element of the Adam's creation is as a lover or a sexual being, and we're going to spend the entire time today talking about sex, man. So
I love that. Well, maybe my cock mushroom reference was right on point. But that is, first of all, I do really want to drive that point home that we talked about last time, which is it's so weird to think about how the garden was man was like the garden wasn't created for man. Man was created to take care of God's garden, and that is like a very different perspective that shifts all the ideas that you have about like creation on its head. It's really interesting.
And I'm hoping too, when we get to the end of this, I've actually got some new ideas, some original ideas, which aren't things that I come up with very often. But I've got some new ideas about how this plays out, and maybe a new takeaway that we can get from this story. So should we start this? I'm not gonna bring my my screen up just yet. I will in a few minutes.
There's not many people that I trust to just, because I got the only notes that I have right now is I don't have many notes. So but normally I have 2 pages of notes. So
no, go ahead. You were.
I was just going to say, the reason is because last time, and just so everyone, I'm trying to be a good host, but Kip specifically asked me not to look into these things in his course, like to leave that episode out, and to not so I can come into this fresh. Yeah.
So, and I'll be full disclosure here. This will be a little bit different than what appears in my course, because what I'm basically going to be doing for this lecture is going through the chapter in my book that I'm presently writing based on the course in order to present this material. So it follows it pretty closely, but there's some expansion and some change. So as I said, what's really at the heart of the story is this fixation on sex. And there seems to be this strange connection that at least some people made between sex and divinity. And I don't know, perhaps the physical euphoria of lovemaking prompted people from time immemorial to envision sexual activity as in some way beyond human limitation. If you've had sex, you understand that. As if the cascade of...
My wife and I are waiting 10 years after we're married because we want to be extra Christian. So
this isn't going to help this lecture. So it's just gonna drive you to distraction, my friend. So it's as if the cascade of dopamine was what it must be like to be a god. So in verse 20 of chapter 2, we read this, that for the Adam, he did not find help like his opposite. The animals that Yahweh God had created, remember, he created them out of the dirt, just like the Adam, and brought them to the Adam. So the animals brought to the man ended up serving a utilitarian function, but there is something more that is missing. The story so far is about the Adam's place in looking after God's urban estate. And to that end, he has been provided help for seeing through this task. But the man and Yahweh discover together that these creatures are not the same. They're useful insofar as the Adam has identified their function in naming them. You'll recall from the last lecture that naming provides purpose and identifies function for the animals, right? But they are ultimately deemed inadequate for some reason to satisfy all of the Adam's needs. We are not told what those needs are up front. But with a little imagination and reading through the whole story carefully, you understand what the problem here is. So this discovery comes with the narration of its resolution. In verses 21 to 22, Yahweh responds to the Adam's dissatisfaction in this way. And this is my translation. Yahweh God cast a deep sleep over the Adam, and he slept. He took out one of his ribs and closed the flesh under it. Yahweh God built the rib that he took from the Adam into a woman, and he brought her to the Adam. Is that it? Yeah, okay. So unlike the Adam, the animals and the birds, the woman is not created from the dirt. The woman from the very start is part of the Adam. I'm going to bring my slides up at this point. I think this is where they start. But this is a really, really important point, and I don't want this to be lost on people. Okay? In the beginning, we tend to think of the Adam, the as the same being as the man. But I'm going to challenge you with this. The Adam is both, how do I put this? Both the woman and the man embody the Adam. In fact, the woman is part of the Adam. Man and woman are recreations from this creature, this primordial creature, the Adam. So this is what is often lost in the surface reads of this story. It's the making of the woman is also the making of a new man. The Adam calls her wrong one, Isha, which means woman. And he says, because from an Ish, or a man, this one was taken. That's verse 23. So for the first time in the story, the Adam self-identifies using this ubiquitously common term for man in the Hebrew Bible. He is now an Ish from which the Isha was made, like his opposite. The picture is similar, but go ahead.
I'm hoping I'm understanding this correctly. Well, I'm not even sure if I'm hoping to understand this correctly. Are you saying that Adam, or like Adam, prior to Eve, was not really a man?
Not
but was like some
man.
other,
yeah,
not a normal man. He was like some other thing.
He was like the pre-gendered man.
The pre-gendered. That's good. So Adam was what was? Hang on. So was Adam? What's the term? Not like cis.
Asexual or transgender or something like that. No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. Like, I think that's probably going a little bit too far. But I would also suggest that what's taking place in Genesis 2 should make it more comfortable for people, thinking through some of the gender fluidity that we experience in day-to-day life, right? Gandhi says androgynous is probably the most accurate term. It's, and I because it doesn't go into details, the text doesn't really elaborate on what this looks like, right? Or go into the mechanics of this or the thought on this. What we do know is that there's the Adam, and then once Yahweh God removes and then builds the rib into his counterpart, at that point they become man and woman, right? But they're both part of the same creature from the start.
That's interesting. Well, as Ken Ham would say, well, they're still the same kind. No, that's Kent Hovind. That was a Kent Hovind voice. They're still the same kind. The humankind. So one's just like an iPhone 3 and one's an iPhone 4.
There you go. There you go. Okay.
That's interesting.
So, yeah. So I was saying the picture is similar but not identical to what appears in the Genesis 1 creation myth, where the same word is used. God creates the Adam, and here most text translated as mankind, and then they are separated. It says male and female. He created them. This image on the whole then is a visceral picture of the gendered nature of mankind and a projection back to the original androgynous created being. The Isha is part of the Adam. The Adam was like a symbiosis of male and female in one form, but became gendered man and woman only at this point of separation. So
interesting.
Yeah. So Yahweh God, it says, fashions the woman from a rib. The word that is used for this action is bana, Hebrew word, which is commonly translated as to build. It sounds kind of weird. It's commonly used of building structures. So why is it used here of making a woman? It seems like an odd choice, and it's one that's completely missed in modern translations because they don't translate it as Yahweh God built the rib into a woman, right? This is not an accident. nor is it just proof that the writer was abusing a thesaurus. No, the creation of the woman is a very deep cut, recalling a much earlier ancient tradition. And here at this point, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend, our friend, Dr. Joshua Bowen, in his handbook, in his book, The Atheist
speak
Handbook.
For yourself.
Oh, you're not friends anymore? You're
not?
No, you guys break up? No. Oh no.
No,
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, who can be mad
make
at
it
Josh,
weird,
honestly.
man? It's gonna make it weird. Way to make it weird.
Who can be mad? Who can ever be mad at Dr. Josh? But yeah, his book, Atheist Handbook, Volume 1.
It's volume 2. Yes. So this is from Volume 2. He draws significant attention to the appearance of this word in this story. And while the world is completely out of place as a term for creation in the Hebrew Bible, cognates of Bana appear in a wide range of older Akkadian texts. So he cites a couple. The first one he cites is the Epic of Gilgamesh from Tablet 1, Column 2, lines 30 to 35. It says this: "You, Aruru, did create the man." And that word there, create, is Bana, or the Akkadian cognate. "Create now his double, his stormy heart let him match. Let them contend that Uruk may have peace." When Aruru heard this, a double of Anu she conceived within her. Aruru washed her hands, pinched off clay, and cast it on the step. On the step she created valiant Enkidu. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Epic of Gilgamesh in a bit. But here, this is the common word used for create is Bana. These people are built. But that's not the only place it occurs. We also see it in the Enuma Elish. When Marduk hears the words of the gods, his heart prompts him to fashion artful works. Opening his mouth, he addresses Ea to impart the plan he has conceived in his heart. "Blood I will mass and cause bones to be. I will establish Lulu, or man, shall be his name. So then Luluman I will create." And there, it's the same word, Bana. "He shall be charged with the service of the gods, that they might be praised." And then again, it appears in Atrahasis. It says, "Let the mother goddess create or build a human being. Let men assume the drudgery of God." So in his summary of this point, this is what Josh says. He says the combination of the common use of the verb to build in other ancient Near Eastern creation stories, coupled with usage in the Old Testament, suggests that this is an echo of a Mesopotamian tradition. So it's a signal to us that this story has been richly informed by some of these much older creation myths.
Wow. That I love that. I'm so interested in someone, Vishanti. This is so cool, and I agree. It's so interesting when you start to see these similarities, and you understand the biblical texts in context. Creation stories in context.
Yes, yes. Well, if you love that, you're gonna love what's coming up. Okay. So Yahweh
this
God
coffee's getting me all giddy.
Oh goody. Yahweh God creates the woman. And he brings her to the Adam in verses 23 to 24. And upon seeing her, he says this. He exclaims, "This one is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for from man she was taken." It's a lovely picture of sexual union that truly sets the creation of the woman in proper view, especially relative to the rest of the animals. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. Is not just made from the same stuff as the Adam. She is part of him from the very beginning. In the Adam's poem, he says that upon leaving his parents, a man will, the word here is davak, he will cling or cleave to his woman. And this word is used widely throughout the Hebrew Bible to describe like flesh adhering to bone in Job 19, verse 20, or scales crocodile one to another, also in Job 41, 9 and 15, or the leprosy to skin in 2 Kings 5:27. It's often used of describing attachments of extreme loyalty. So Solomon and Jehoram were both condemned for clinging to their allegiances to gods other than Yahweh in 2 Kings 11:2 and 1 Kings 11:2 and 2 Kings 3:3. Joshua warns the sons of Israel to fix this loyalty only on their God. He says, make sure to diligently follow the commandments and teachings that Moses, the slave of Yahweh, commanded you to love Yahweh your God and to walk in all his ways and to keep his commandments and ledavka, or to cleave unto him and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. The word is used of especially intimate relationships like those of a man and a woman here, or in Ruth 1:14, where it says that Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye for the last time. But it says that Ruth davka, she clung to her. But when it's used here in a causative form, the form of the verb, man says that a man shall leave his mother and father and will basically be caused to cling. It's a bit awkward, so we don't usually translate it that way. Used in the causative form, we see the same word takes on the meaning of pursuing or overtaking a combatant or an enemy. It occurs this way in Genesis 31:23, Genesis 20:45, 1 Samuel 14:22, and 18:22. So I would say, even though it's not, the form is not causative here, one should not lose sight of this sense. In this cultural context where a man's sexual attachment to a woman is very much a form of conquest, I think this might be built in to the meaning of the word here. So, moving on. As with the animals, the Adam has named the woman. But then, later in the same story, he gives her a new name, Chava, which we translate as Eve, and says that this is because she is the mother of all life. This is in Genesis 3:20, and we'll come back to this again in a little bit. So this is also an expression of her function and a declaration of his ownership of her. Remember, this is what naming does. By way of this new name, the woman is, according to this author, by design a baby factory. She is the receptacle for new life. But this later naming event in Genesis 3 is also significant for understanding the ancient Near Eastern background of the woman's formation, where we read that she was made from one of the Adam's ribs. Some commentators have suggested that the is of a woman being formed of the man's side, which is also a possible translation of Selah, which I translate as rib. The excellent Semiticist Zioni Zavit even wrote a couple of really weird articles a number of years ago and creatively argued that the Selah in this context was a baculum, like a penile bone, that is present in many animals but not in humans. Of course, there's some problems with this idea, not to which that the word is in plural. So it says that he took one of his ribs in Genesis 2:21. How odd that the Edenic human would have many of these appendages. So I don't think it's a penile bone. Let's just get that out of the way.
Going back to what
it's not too weird.
It's not too weird.
It's not too weird.
There seems to be some audio jumps that are happening.
Oh no!
Is it with just Kip, or is it? This happened last time as well. I don't know what's going on.
It did.
It's a little glitchy.
I wonder if it's because my computer is working so hard.
That sounds like that could be it. Actually,
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all right. Hang on. Last time I removed you and then I brought you back on, and that's sometimes fixes it, or unmute you.
Okay.
Let's see if that works.
Hopefully that fixes it. All right. So,
it's being recorded locally, by the way. So, and I'll probably make this into a video, and we'll be able to upload it in high resolution if anyone's interested.
Nice. All right. So I think the reading that this is also suffers from similar reasons. The description that Yahweh clothed in its place with flesh presumes something like closing a door, which seems unexpected if this is like a whole bisection of the Adam. The benefit of reading this is the removal of one Adam, the Adam's ribs, is that this is more in keeping with the sense that the woman is like his offspring, a mere reflection of him. It is admittedly a frustrating blur, and while I maintain that the identification of the Selah as a rib is an integral part of the source and meaning of this story, it also seems likely to me that this sense may have been missed over time in favor of reading Selah as side. But in my opinion, the more significant, interesting reason why this story is about fashioning one of the man's ribs into a woman is that is an echo of this image in much more ancient ideas. So, like with the usage of the word bana, the appearance of the rib also resonates with the considerably older creation tradition. In Sumerian, the word ti means both rib and it means living. And it's not by accident that in Genesis 2:22, Yahweh built the rib into a woman who was then later called the mother of all life, right? So this linguistic connection is made by way of a very old creation story called Enki and Ninurshag, wherein the great god Enki performs creative acts by, and this is a fun story, Enki performs his creative acts by ejaculating into the ground and filling the rivers, the canals, and the watercourses, and inseminating the dry earth. Right?
That's hot.
It's hot. So Enki then he impregnates his consort Ninurshag, who gives birth to the goddess Ninmu. Enki proceeds to impregnate then Ninmu, who gives birth to Ninkura, and the cycle repeats over and over. Eventually, the goddess Utu is born, and when Enki has sexual intercourse with her, Ninurshag somehow manipulates his semen to make inedible plants instead of another goddess. And then Enki eats the plants, and he becomes gravely ill. Like, it's weird. It's a weird story.
What is this? Where's this story from? I recognize it.
It's from Sumeria. So
what is it? Just like a random book, or is it part of like Lord of the Rings?
It's a creation myth all on its own. So,
yeah, is it called the? What's it called though? Like,
it's called.
To look it up.
I think it's called, in some places it's called the Dilmun poem, but commonly it's referred to as Enki and Ninurshag.
Okay.
Yeah. So then.
Okay.
So Enki's gravely ill, right? Ninurshag is then called upon by the ruler of the gods Enlil to heal Enki. So this is what the text says. I'm just reading here directly. Ninurshag seated Enki by her vulva. My brother, what hurt you? It's fragmentary, so we don't know what it says. Hurts me. Abu, I have cause to be born for you. My brother, what hurts you? My jaw hurts me. Nintula, I have cause to be born to you. My brother, what hurts you? My tooth hurts me. Nitsutu, I have cause to be born to you. My brother, what hurts you? My mouth hurts me. Ninkasi, I have cause to be born to you. My brother, what hurts you? And the story goes on like this, right? Each of the newborn goddesses that Ninurshag delivers to heal Enki's ailments is named for a specific body part that is afflicted. Eventually, Ninurshag gets around to healing his rib. My brother, what hurts you? My rib hurts me. Ninti, I have caused to be born for you. So, Ninti is more literally translated maiden of the rib, but interestingly, it also means the maiden who makes alive. When the woman in Genesis 2 is built from the rib in verse 22 and then named Chava, the mother of all life, in 3:20, she is an unmistakable reflection here of the lady of the rib who makes alive. So
again, there's just so. I thought it stopped and ended with the Great Flood narratives in the Epic of Gilgamesh, You know, even like is it the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Enuma Elish? But it's one of them, and
it's Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah, and doesn't he sends off a bird? You know, same, like it's the same story. And I was like, wow, there's so many similarities there. But
so many.
But what this is kind of showing is this, it's beyond that. It's like down to the roots.
But I think the thing that excites me about this is it also, I think this also just really emphasizes the skill and the artistry of the writer of Genesis. And it changes the story. It is something that's not expected, right? Like it's the meaning of this story is really, I think, quite different, much deeper, much more interesting than how we've received it. Mostly thanks to, you know, later interpretations in the New Testament, of course. So, you know, when most people read this story, they read verse 25 at the conclusion. This episode, before transitioning into the tragedy that follows in Genesis 3, which says this. So the two of them, the man, the Adam and his woman, they were naked, but they were not ashamed. Now, what did that mean? We're going to find out. So, as there's a common Christian theological view of this story that sees what follows as a separate act. Like there's this break at the end of chapter 2 in verse 25 and the beginning almost a new story in chapter 3. You know who John MacArthur is? He's a crazy old man.
I recognize the name.
Pastors a church in Southern California. And he writes a lot. He's written a whole study Bible. Like, and in his study Bible, this is fairly common. It divides this creation myth like this. It says the story of Adam and Eve is the first story is called Adam and Eve in Eden from 2:4 to 25, followed by the fall. Its outcomes in chapter 3, verse 1 to 24. So we're so accustomed to thinking about Genesis 3 as the story of the fall, right?
Yeah.
On the heels of the story of Adam and Eve.
It just reminds me too that because the chapters and verses, they're not there in the Hebrew, right? They were added.
No, nothing. There's no chapters and verses.
It's just one long, like there's
originally,
no like stop.
Probably, yeah. I mean, do have manuscripts that insert paragraph breaks and block markers, right? But these are later, and we're
by doing that, you're adding theological interpretation.
Yeah,
by going, this is the end of a chapter. Now it's the next chapter. You're adding, you know, you're adding
exactly. It can be difficult to see any other way when you're so accustomed to reading it like this. I would say
trying really hard to look for Jesus.
Yeah. And this idea of the fall, I don't think it's in there, right? Like this is something that we have the Apostle Paul to thank for that, right? Through one man, sin entered into the cosmos, and through sin, death. So then death has passed through all mankind because all have sinned. That's Romans 5:12. And, you know, he's getting that out of this story. However, I tend to believe that this division is too pronounced and that the drama in what follows cannot be clearly understood apart from this very interesting literary hinge that takes place in Genesis 2:25 and 3:1. This is one of the unfortunate outcomes of the introduction of chapters and versification, as you suggested. Yeah, it's necessary to aid our modern navigation of a large collection of literature like the Bible, but these can also intrude in stories which were originally and for hundreds of years read without them. They're artificial interpretive markers. Just like you said, you're reading ahead, which can, in effect, change the meaning of that. And I think that's what's happening here. Is this a story about creation and fall. Let's take another look with fresh eyes and with the hinge swinging in the right direction.
Well, firstly, as I kind of predicted, like what the next part of your book was going to write about, can I be listed as a co-author? Because I mean, I kind of helped. You know what I mean?
So much, David. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you.
Dr. Kip Davis and David. Don't even need to give me a last name. Just write in David.
Just David.
All right, let's bring.
All right, so let's this back up and let's continue. Yeah, look how slow that is. I bet you it's because my poor sad old computer
is it just plugged in to a is it plugged into a power source?
Yeah. So I know. Yeah, I know it sucks. All right. So I'm actually going to read my translation of the next part of this story. But I'm going to show pictures from the Brick Bible. I left it on the shelf, but I hope everyone knows where to get it. And if you haven't bought it already, if there's a book you're going to buy, you got to buy the Brick Bible. You just have to. It's so good. Okay. So two of them, the Adam and his woman, they were naked, but they were not ashamed. Now, the Nachash, or the snake, was more clever than all the animals of the field that Yahweh God had made. And he said to the woman, God also said that you should not eat of every tree in the garden. The woman responded to the Nachash, from the fruit of the tree, from the fruit of an ordinary tree of the garden, we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, God said, do not eat from that one, do not even touch it, or else you will die. The Nachash said to the woman, surely you will not die, for God knows that on the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will become like gods, knowing good and bad. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasing to the eyes, and it was desirable to make wise. So she took from its fruit. She ate, and she gave it to her man with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of the two of them were opened, and they knew. Sorry, I lost my place. And they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves and made loincloths for themselves. Then they heard the sound of Yahweh God walking in the garden in the wind of the day. And the Adam and his woman kept themselves hidden from the face of Yahweh God in the middle of the tree of the garden. And Yahweh God called to the Adam, and he said, where are you? And he said, I heard your sound in the garden, and I was afraid because I'm naked. So I hid myself. He responded, who told you you were naked? Did you eat of the tree from which I forbade you not to eat? The Adam said, the woman you set beside me, she is the one who gave to me from the tree, and I ate. Then Yahweh God spoke to the woman, what is this you have done? The woman responded, the Nachash deceived me, and I ate. So Yahweh God said to the Nachash, so you have done this. You are more cursed than the livestock and all the animals of the field. On your belly you shall walk, and dirt you shall eat all the days of your life. Enmity I shall set between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel. To the woman he said, I will make most severe your pain in your groaning. In agony you will deliver sons. Unto your man you shall be your desire. He will rule over you. Then to the Adam he said, because you listened to the voice of your woman, you ate from the tree of which I instructed you, saying, you shall not eat from it. The ground is cursed because of you. By your drudgery you shall eat from it all the days of your life. And thistle shall sprout for you, but you will eat grain of the field by the sweat of your face. You shall eat bread until you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, since you are dirt, and unto dirt you shall return. And at that point, the Adam called the name of his woman Chava, because she was the mother of all life. Yahweh God made for the Adam and his woman skin tunics, and he clothed them. But then Yahweh God said, "See now, the Adam has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. So what prevents him that he must stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever?" So Yahweh God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground where he was taken. He drove out the Adam and stationed on the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming, whirling sword to guard the way of the tree of life. There they go. Don't they look bad? So, that's the story. Now, what does it mean? So, in the critical hinge between Genesis 2 and 3, we read two things. First, that the Adam and his woman are arumim. They were naked, and they were without embarrassment at the sight of each other. It is a picture of naivety and childlike innocence. Second, we are introduced to this creature, the Nachash, and we learn of him that he is more arum, more clever than the rest of the animals. Now, the careful reader will already see that there's an obvious, fascinating words here that does not translate into English. The word which means naked is identical to that which is applied to the serpent and translated as clever, cunning, or crafty. The Adam and his woman were naked. The Nachash was more naked, fitting for a creature that periodically sheds its skin. Reciprocally speaking, the Adam and his woman are clever, but the Nachash was more clever. So the choice of meaning intended between naked and clever in both instances is intentionally indistinguishable apart from context, and this provides a very important clue about the significance and meaning of this story. As we move forward, please keep these ideas in view with regard to the questions of who the gods are and what they do. So who is this creature, the Nachash? English translations will most commonly render this word as serpent or snake. And one of the features of this story is as an etymology. That means it's as an etymology. I think we talked about this in the first lecture, right? Like these are stories which are told to explain why things are the way they are. So part of the explanatory power of this story is answering questions about where people come from and why we behave the way we do. Why do humans couple? Why are we embarrassed by our own nakedness as well as the nakedness of everyone else? I mean, honestly, it's embarrassing to see naked people, right? You know, when you're out and about.
I love seeing naked people, to be honest, in most situations. But
we were at a natural hot springs on the weekend, and we saw quite a few naked people. So,
were you naked yourself?
No. I'm too embarrassed.
That's yeah. It's so funny because I when I was a youth pastor, I did a preach on that verse. Who told you were naked? I just read the verse and then I got to that point. Who told you were naked? And I went on about, essentially shame, guilt, I'm whatever it is. And then who told you were naked? The whole point was, in my Christian youth pastor worldview, was like the devil, the accuser. He accuses you of all these things. And but who told you that? Because I made you perfect. I made, so it was a very positive message, a message I can probably still get behind, because although I don't believe in the devil or demons or the accuser, your brain definitely sometimes tells you, like discourages you. Like, at least for me, my brain is very discouraging a lot of the time. Some grew up with anxiety and depression. So yeah, who told you that? Who told you that you suck, Dave? whatever.
The answer to that question in the story is no one told them they were naked. They figured this out. How did they?
That's actually true.
Yeah.
This I don't know, Kip, if we can pause for a couple minutes just so you can maybe like refresh the browser or something, because the audio. I don't know if the audio, like people are mentioning the audio glitches.
Nuts? I'm sorry, everyone.
No, it's all right. Or I don't know if you can.
Oh wow! Look, you're apologizing for me.
Sorry, I just said.
All right,
I didn't mean. I just typed it out.
I'll refresh my browser here, and hopefully that.
And in the meantime, I'll shout out your channel and talk about the course. So, So first of all, thanks for everyone for checking this out. Dr. Kip has an amazing channel, obviously, and we're live over there now. And if you're coming here from Deep Drinks, I mean, it's all great stuff. Diablo Critics is coming out soon. We also have let me just share this tab instead. We also, if you're on Kip's channel, we have my channel. And we actually have coming up, we have this episode, which will be really cool. We have Michael Koner coming on, and I respect Michael Koner a lot, actually. And he's obviously a Christian professor, way too good looking and healthy looking for his age, to be honest.
Right?
I thought he was like 40.
He's
like nearly 70.
He's like almost nearly 70 years old.
It's crazy. And he looks healthier than me, like for sure. Anyway, so that annoys me. But anyway, I'll bring that up when I talk to him. But yeah, that's next week. That's going to be great. And so check out, this channel. I have deep conversations over deep drinks. Sometimes we have alcohol. Those drinks are alcoholic, and Kip has been a party to that many times. And of course, if you like what we're seeing here, Dr. Kip has a course about this very subject. This is only one part of like 14 hours of like the course. And if you use the affiliate link, you help myself out, the Deep Drinks out, you help Kip out, and you help MVP courses out. So it's a win-win-win for everyone. But let's see if that helped.
Win-win-win. Yes, that win-win-win-win, because then you get a course too that you can keep.
Yeah. Win-win-win-win-win. And it looks like the audio quality is better.
Oh, good! Yay!
That's
all
great.
Right. Okay, so no, I don't need it yet. You can add it to this stage when we're ready. So. Why do humans couple? Why are we embarrassed by our own nakedness and the nakedness of others? Why is childbirth so painful? One of these questions was also about the feelings that many people harbor for snakes. I personally don't like them. I know some people do. I don't. And I think that's normal, right? Snakes for ancient agrarians could be seen as a nuisance. James Kugel, a brilliant professor of the Hebrew Bible at Harvard, wrote an excellent book in which he said that snakes were proverbially clever in the biblical world, but their lack of legs might have indeed have looked like some sort of divine punishment. If so, this story explained their crime. But is this all there is, or is there more to what's going on with the Nakash in this story? So snakes were an off-putting pest, yes, but they were also mysterious creatures. Throughout the ancient Near East, snakes are very commonly viewed as divine symbols. This is reflected in ancient Israelite religions and carried forward in their texts. Take a look, for example, in the story. There's a story in Numbers chapter 21. It's a story which is set in the time before the sons of Israel arrived in Canaan, the land that their God had promised to their ancestors. And while they were traveling through the unforgiving desert of the Sinai Peninsula, the people become disgruntled because life on the road in the desert wilderness is hard. And this is what it says in verses 4-5. People became impatient, and the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you led us up from Egypt to die in the desert? For there is no bread and water, and we detest this miserable food to our core. Then, out of anger, Yahweh unleashes upon them deadly serpents to punish the people for their insolence. Continuing in verse 6. So God sent against the people the Nechashim HaSepharim, the fiery snakes. And they bit the people, and many of the people of Israel died. So this expression is this expression that I read, Nechashim HaSepharim, is commonly translated as poisonous or venomous snakes. But we should not sidestep the mystical element at work here. These creatures are more literally the fiery Nachashim, the plural form of the same word in Genesis 3, Nachash. The Nakash. Sorry, I just read that twice. So moreover, the word fiery is one that many will recognize from other biblical texts where it's used of God's attendants, the Seraphim. You've heard of these guys, haven't you? The Seraphim.
No.
It's in Isaiah 6. These are the angels who stand above Yahweh's throne. The word, no. Yeah.
Why? No, I'm not doubting that it's there. I just don't remember.
Oh, you don't know it.
Okay. It's been like 10 years since I read Isaiah.
You should start reading it again because it's
I do want to. I got this huge. Do you see it? Maybe it's back here. There's like huge Robert Alter's like translation of the Hebrew Bible.
That's a good one. That's a very good one.
Yeah,
I like.
I really want to. I really want to dig into that.
But the Seraphim. This word literally means the burning ones, like things that are on fire. So are these really just desert serpents? After the people cry out to Moses, he petitions Yahweh for relief, and Yahweh responds in a peculiar way. He says, make for yourself a seraph, a burning one, and mount it on a standard. So whoever is bitten and looks at it, he shall live. And then it says, Moses made a Nachash Nehoshat, or a copper serpent, and mounted it on a standard. And when anyone was bitten by the serpent, he would look at the Nachash HaNochashet and recover. Do you notice the interchange between those two words? Yahweh instructed Moses to make a seraph, and he fashioned a bronze Nachash. The bronze statue that Moses had fashioned makes another appearance in a much later text in 2 Kings chapter 18. This is supposedly several hundred years after the time of Moses. In the kingdom of Judah, King Hezekiah undertakes a religious reform which includes the expulsion of gods, those other than Yahweh, and their images from the Jerusalem temple. And then it has this very interesting statement in verse 4. We read this of 2 Kings 18. It says, he removed the bamot, or the high places. He smashed the pillars and cut down the Asherah. Those are the poles, or the trees, the sacred trees. He also crushed into pieces the Nachash HaNochoshet that Moses had made. For until those days, the sons of Israel were offering sacrifices to it. It was called Nehushtan. So this Nehushtan is described much like popular iconography from throughout the ancient Near East. One of the finest examples is a copper snake figurine overlaid in gold foil that was discovered at Timnah, some 30 kilometers north of the Gulf of Aqaba. This exquisite artifact dates to the 12th century BCE, to a time when the region was controlled by the Edomites. It was discovered in a tent shrine along with a substantial cache of Midianite pottery and other metal jewelry. So the point here is that the Nachash, throughout the Hebrew Bible, including in Genesis 3, is not just a garden snake. It's some sort of mythic divine being. The verb from which the word Nachash stems is used in the Bible for fortune telling. These indicators all point quite clearly to the identity of the Nachash in Genesis 3. This is a divine being among the gods in Yahweh's garden.
Oh my God. I wondered why the snake had all this like information about. Oh man,
it's fun, eh?
So fun. Oh, this is so.
Yeah. So
this puts it in so much more like this gives so much more context to everything. And you said before that you think that the writer of Genesis was brilliant. Was it just one writer, do you think? Or do you think
I think the writer of this story
yeah.
And I think the whoever put together composition that we know as Genesis was brilliant too. I mean, I think there was a lot of hard work and brain power behind these very, very deep stories. Which you and that's the cool thing about a story like this is if you read it over and over and over again, the more you understand it, the more broadly you read of literature, around it, you see new things all the time, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's fun. This is fun, right? We're fun, guys.
I'm having a lot of fun. This is fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's talk now about one of the questions that's raised in the narrative that follows. And that concerns the relationship introduced in the stories between knowledge and nakedness. As the Nakash and the human couple are all naked and clever, remember, the entire story turns on these features. To track how this works and why, we need to probe more deeply into the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is often called the most famous story of the ancient world. It's this enormously popular story from, ancient Mesopotamia. It's often regarded as the earliest surviving great work of literature. So Gilgamesh is a king of the ancient city of Uruk, and he was very unpopular among his subjects for his relentless position on their sons to fight his wars, but more seriously because of his rapacious sexual appetites. The text says, the nobles of Uruk worried in their chambers. Gilgamesh leaves not the son unto his father. Day and night is unbridled his arrogance. Is this Gilgamesh, the shepherd of ramparted Uruk? Is this our shepherd, bold, stately, wise? Gilgamesh leaves not the maid of her mother, the warrior's daughter, the noble spouse. So the people complain to the gods and propose to the creator deities Anu and Aruru a solution. Create now his double, his stormy heart, let him match. Let them contend that Uruk may have peace. So Aruru pinched off a piece of clay and tossed it on the step. We actually read this already. You'll remember when we were talking about the verb bana, right? She tossed the piece of clay onto the step, and she made this into the creature, Enkidu. Shaggy with hair is his whole body. He is endowed with head hair like a woman. The locks of his hair sprout like Nisaba. He knows neither people nor land. Garbed is he like Sumokan. With the gazelles he feeds on grass. With the wild beasts he jostles at the watering place. So he's kind of like a wild animal. So the wild Enkidu protects the animals from of the forest from the hunters in Uruk. And Gilgamesh responds by dispatching a prostitute, Shamhat, in order to seduce Enkidu. And do I have this one on screen here? Let me see what I got. Okay. Sorry, I was neglecting my slides. Yes, this at the heart of this story is the themes of immortality, sex, humanity, and civilization. You recall I talked a little bit about this before, about humans being banished from Yahweh's urban masterpiece. Or have I got to that yet? No, I don't think I have. Did I say that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. we have this, some scholars suggest, I really like this idea, that in particular, one of the sources of the book of Genesis, the one in which this story appears, was written almost as like a response to the Epic of Gilgamesh and its fixation on the greatness of the city of Uruk. As like an anti-urban sort of polemic. So you see, the humans are banished from Yahweh's urban masterpiece. In Genesis 4:17, Cain, who's the first murderer, is also the first person in the Bible to build a city. Then in Genesis chapter 10, the notorious Nimrod builds Uruk, Akkad, and Babylon. And then in Genesis 11, you see Yahweh again disperses the people from Babylon. And in Genesis 12, Abraham is called out of Ur, out of the city. And he spends the rest of his life wandering and never settles, right? Importantly, Abraham spends his life just wandering around and never settles in the cities anywhere. So it's, and also in Genesis 13, Lot settles in Sodom and Gomorrah, and disaster ensues. So there's a very strong anti-urban message that's just built right into like this whole story. So that's kind of at the background here.
Just before you move on, can I just show you something really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Before I knew anything about anything, I still don't really know anything about anything. My wife and I were in Berlin, and we went to the Pergamon Museum.
Oh.
And only years later,
I love that place.
Oh man, did I discover its relevance? So obviously Babylon, right?
Babylonian.
These are the actual walls. Yeah. These are the wall. These aren't a reconstruction.
Well, the top part is the reconstruction. Like you can see the line there, right? Like you can see the line. Sorry, go back to that other picture. No, or forward.
Oh, this one.
With the picture of you, you see there's kind of a line there where the bricks are all faded. No, the one with you, lower bricks are all faded.
Oh yeah.
So as far as I understand it, that's the what the actual,
and they reconstructed,
and then they reconstructed the stuff above it. I believe that's correct. It's such a
we're walking around this place going like, this is cool, but we have no idea like what's a Sumerian. Like we had
now you have to go back.
I know. Wow. Do you know there is a funny story. When we were in Edinburgh, right, we did this tour, and I see you pulling out the liquor, so we know things are going to get good. But we were in Edinburgh, right, and we were still Christians at the time, although I was very open to kind of investigating the world and kind of coming in without bringing much biases. Like we went to a Shinto temple, even though I thought there might be demons. Yeah, and all the stuff.
How brave of you, David.
I know. I even washed my hands, so I partook in the ceremony. Yeah, to walk in out of respect.
You're not, and you didn't get infested with the.
Well, maybe you did. Maybe this is all. Maybe this is all where it started. But in all seriousness, that's actually part of my deconstruction. Is I was watching people, Sakasa blow smoke on their face as a cleansing ritual, and then I realized, even if I could prove to these people nothing's happening to them in the spirit realm, it wouldn't actually matter. Like the tradition is what matters. And then I was like, well, how much of my tradition is just like that? Anyway, beyond that, we're in Edinburgh. We're on this tour, and in this tour, there's like this statue, and big toe is hanging out of this statue, and it's all shiny. It's brass. It's all shiny because everyone touches the big toe, and the tour guide's like, this toe. People say that if you rub this philosopher's toe, you'll get the enlightenment of the philosopher or whatever. And I was like, okay. So we were rubbing this toe, like it's a joke. Everyone on the tour rubbed the toe. Only 4 of us. And we finished the tour, it's all good. And everything. Years later, right, I'm right into the atheist experience, and Matt Dillahunty keeps bringing up David Hume. And I become obsessed with David Hume. I'm reading, the treatise on miracles. I'm reading his work. Not reading a whole lot, but I'm really interested in him. So I'm like looking up photos of David Hume. I'm like, oh, who is this David Hume? Google, searching him. I'm like, well, I recognize that statue. And only then did I realize that it was the same statue I was rubbing his toe off. So maybe spiritual world confirmed. Yeah, I don't know. But it was really weird. I was like, wow, like my favorite philosopher ends up being the guy I was rubbing his toe off a few years later. Yeah.
You.
Yeah, Hume got me.
That's awesome. That's so great. I love it. So Berlin's like my favorite city in Europe, by the way. God, I love Berlin.
We were in Berlin and it was like negative. It was cold. It was cold.
Oh,
it was
really?
And it was it was like near Christmas, and we had like 4 pairs of gloves on, and we did this bike tour where you bike around the city.
Oh, but you're from Australia, so it was probably
it was cold. Like it was
probably just like another day here.
It was -2 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's
no. Here it's like 20, and I'm like, oh, it's nice and cool, a bit cold. Anyway, so I don't know what that is in American. Is that like 45 does eagles, bald eagles? Like, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. 45 bald eagles or 27 AK-47s. I don't know what measurement you guys.
I don't know. I don't know Fahrenheit either. I'm a Canadian. Okay. So all right. So back to it. Yeah, let's continue here. So remember, Gilgamesh responds by dispatching this prostitute, Shamhat, with the intention of seducing Enkidu. And here's what the text says. Shamhat, I'm actually reading a different version than what's on the screen. So you'll get, and I think I have more here. Shamhat freed her breasts, bared her bosom, and he possessed her ripeness. She was not bashful as she welcomed his adore. She laid aside her cloth, and he rested upon her. It's getting hot, people.
Whew, yeah, I'm going.
She treated him, the savage, to a woman's task, as his love was dawn unto her. For 6 days and 7 nights, Enkidu comes forth, mating with Shamhat. This seduction has the result of domesticating Enkidu. The text says, after he had his fill of her charms, he set his face toward his wild beasts. On seeing him, Enkidu, the gazelles, ran off. The wild beasts of the steppe drew away from his body. Startled was Enkidu, and his body became taut. His knees were motionless, for his wild beasts had gone. Enkidu had a slacken of his pace. It was not as before, but he now had wisdom, broader understanding. Enkidu then is clothed by Shamhat and sent on his way to Uruk. She says to him, "You have become wise, Enkidu. You have become like a god. Why with the wild creatures do you roam over the steppe? Come, let me lead you to ramparted Uruk, to the holy temple, abode of Anu and Ishtar, where lives Gilgamesh, accomplished in strength, and like a wild ox, lords it over the folk." So, the newly gentrified Enkidu arrives in the city at a wedding and is horrified by Gilgamesh, who is about to perform his royal prerogative. They fight. Gilgamesh defeats Enkidu, but the fight itself distracts him from deflowering the new bride. After the fight, Gilgamesh and Enkidu embrace and become fast friends. The rest of the epic of Gilgamesh follows with stories of the adventures and escapades of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. And then after Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh embarks on his all-consuming quest to discover immortality, eventually leading him back home to the eternal city, his city, Uruk. So why do we compare this story to the Genesis 2 to 3 creation myth? Well, on several points, there is a correspondence between words, images, and concepts that greatly illuminates the significance of what's taking place in the Garden of God in Eden. So first, notice God's instructions to the Adam and his woman that they repeat to the Nachash in Genesis 3. Has God also said that you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? The woman responded to the Nachash, from the fruit of an ordinary tree of the garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, God said, do not eat from that one. Do not even touch it, or else you will die. the naked Nachash responds with a promise. Surely you will not die, for God knows that in the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will become like gods, knowing good and bad. At this, you will recall how Enkidu, after his sexual encounter, becomes like a god. How much like the promise of the Nachash to the woman is this? She will become like God as a result of eating fruit from the tree, gaining a sense to know good and evil. The woman and the Adam both eat the fruit, and the word of the Nachash is realized true. They suddenly have knowledge of their nakedness. The word which translates here as knowledge is familiar to many readers of the Bible in its verbal form. For a man to know a woman is to penetrate her sexually. This is especially so for this author in Genesis. In Genesis 4:1, the Adam later knew his woman, and she became pregnant. Moreover, the verb most commonly used to eat appears. I'm skipping ahead here. Oh, there it is. To eat. Got it. All right. The word most commonly to eat appears occasionally as euphemistic of sexual desire. Proverbs 30 verse 20 says this: such is the way of an adulteress. She eats, wipes her mouth, and says, I have done nothing wrong. The sexual innuendo carried through in the Genesis 3 story, where we are told that the woman saw the fruit of the tree, was pleasing to the eyes. It was desirable to make one wise. These are words elsewhere used to describe lusts of the flesh in the book of Proverbs or in the Song of Songs. So the woman takes the fruit from the tree. She eats it. She gives it to the Adam, and he eats. But then in verse 7, the eyes of the two of them are opened, and they knew that they were naked. The Adam and his wife did not die as Yahweh had threatened in Genesis 2:17 upon eating of the fruit of the tree of good and bad. On the day that you eat from it, you will definitely die, is what he said. Rather, as the Nachash had predicted, they became like gods. Their eyes were opened. As Enkidu was metaphysically changed, so too are the Adam and his woman. We continue to read in verse 7 that with this sudden discovery of their own nakedness, the couple sewed fig leaves and made loincloths for themselves. This also reminds us of Enkidu, who upon leaving his forested home, the prostitute Shamhat, has clothed him as a sign of his newly discovered humanity. The Adam and his wife were sexual beings, as indicated by Genesis 2:23-24, but that sexuality carried with it attendant consequences. Much like the story of Enkidu and Gilgamesh, there's a strong connection here between sexual maturity, awareness, and the transition to mortality. The Adam and his woman have hidden from Yahweh, who was walking about in the garden, because they have been ashamed of their own nakedness. When confronted, they admit their embarrassment, and Yahweh's response to this is very telling. He says, who told you that you were naked? Did you eat from the tree which I forbade you not to eat? His questions leave little doubt that the Adam's sudden realization is the result of eating from the forbidden tree. But we are also connected to the play on words from the transition in this story between their nakedness and the cunning of the Nachash. Is this knowledge? Is it sex? Is it divinity? And I would suggest to you that these are questions that are left in the air intentionally by the writer of this story. So, Paul, I have this note here that Paul misquotes this passage and it sets added force to the verb when he says that the God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet. That's not. You'll notice that in the original story in Genesis 3, where this quotation appears, it's the same verb. the snake will bruise your heel and you will bruise his head. But you know, that's what Paul does. So the story concludes in verses 14 to 19 with the consequence of their indiscretion. The Nachash is punished for his role in the couple's abrupt self-discovery. He's told this: "You are more cursed than all the livestock and the animals of the field. On your belly you shall walk, and dirt you shall eat all the days of your life. Enmity I shall set between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel." In one of the medieval rabbinic tractates, so this is much later, this is a medieval text, the fathers, according to Rabbi Natan, the Nachash is delimbed. He has legs and they're taken off. The rabbis say that the snake touched the tree with his hands and his feet, shook until the fruit fell to the ground. They go on to infer of his punishment the following: "You have said, I shall kill man and marry woman. There shall put hatred between you and the woman. You have said, I shall be king over the whole world. Therefore, you are most cursed of all cattle. You have said, I shall walk upright. Therefore, on your belly you shall walk. You have said, I shall eat all the gourmet foods in the world. Therefore, you will eat dirt all the time that you live." A feature of this verdict is how the relationship between the Nachash and the woman is turned acrimonious. This is the most frequent part of the curse on the Nachash that draws attention to Christian readers, since the Apostle Paul identifies the creature with Satan, but then also exaggerates the force of the verb in his allusion to this promise of Yahweh, as I have here on the screen. So the woman is stricken with pain in childbirth and subordinated to her husband. The land is cursed, and the Adam's toil is no longer in the service of keeping God's garden, but is rather expended on his own survival. In verse 20, the Adam, for a second time, exercises his ownership of the woman by giving her another name, Havah. She's the mother of all life. The naming of the woman both times is an intriguing feature of the pregnant meaning of the whole story. As noted, there was in Sumerian a play on the word rib and life. Interestingly, there seems to be another significant play on words in Old Canaanite, where the same word, chaval, also meant snake. Forms of this word survive in Aramaic, which is closely related to Hebrew. In the story of the fiery snakes that we read in Numbers 21:9, mm-hmm. Aramaic translations render this with the same word, Chava, Eve. And indeed, in Genesis 3, this is the word that is also used for the Nachash, Chava. And finally, if there's any doubt as to the connection between sex and the encounter between the woman and the Nachash, one of the Aramaic translations of this story, the Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, portrays this creature as actually a wicked angel named Samael in disguise. It says this: "Then the woman saw Samael, the angel of death, and she was afraid." As you read on through the story of the incident, God's reaction, the curses to the snake, the woman, and the ground, it is later revealed that Samael seduces the woman and had sexual intercourse with her. And the Adam knew his woman, Eve, had become pregnant by Samael, the angel of Yahweh. She was desirable to the angel, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have created a man, an angel of Yahweh. And that's Targum Pseudo-Jonathan of Genesis 4:1. So that's, let's see, do I have something else? Oh yeah, there it is. So the point is there's this very interconnected thematic mess going on here between knowledge and sex and immortality. And some of these questions about what's happening in the story are intentionally left open-ended so as to suggest, we don't entirely know what happened. Did Eve have sex with the snake? Is that what was at the heart of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? We don't know. But the outcome of the story is this opening of their eyes and this realization of divinity, of becoming like gods. So I think I'm done with the slides, but I have a little bit more here to share.
Well, could I just ask a quick question?
Yes, good place.
How would, if I was to bring this up to like Michael Licona or another type of apologist who's relatively educated, in like knows a little bit, a doctor of something, would they accept this kind of interpretation, or would they just say this is fringe whack? Like what I'm trying to get at is, for us as, and this is something that that I guess Ammon Hillman doesn't do. I just use my mind because someone said it's comical how Hillman is living rent free. Talked about him for 10 minutes, but something he doesn't do is like, I want to know how close to consensus is this? Like, if you were to get experts in the field that are all, would they say this is a pretty strong consensus, or would you say it's quite off to one side? And if it is consensus, how do I guess Christian apologists make sense of this? Let's assume educated and well and non and honest, as honest as you can be as an apologist. Not like, I'm not talking about like the Ken Hams or the or the Frank Turek's.
If Mike Licona's seminary training is really good, then he'll know about this. Of course, depending on where you go, there's always, of course, these sorts of readings are always going to be rejected by Christian apologists who will. What's typical is that they will do their best to undermine the connections with other ancient Near Eastern texts and suggest that scholars who have been making these connections are overreading them, that they're seeing things that aren't really there. So that's a common response, and one likely that you're likely to get from most evangelicals. But this is pretty. If you pick up any introduction to the Old Testament that was written for like a university class, you'll read something similar to what I presented here in terms of what's going on in the story, the relationship of the story to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and some of these interesting literary connections and some of the imagery and stuff, right? But and I think importantly, as we, something else I'll say, because this came up, I think, in our first episode of this, you'll notice that there's no sin in here.
Yes. I remember Heathen Queen, because I watched it last time. I remember Heathen Queen
screaming at you,
screaming at me in the chat. Stop, and Vishanti maybe, stop putting Jesus in the Old Testament. I'm sorry, I didn't read the Old Testament when I was under the New Covenant, baby. When I was a Christian,
all about the New Covenant, baby. So this, and I think this is so important. Yeah, we see you, Vishanti. This is so important to getting the story right. Like, as soon as you've glossed it over with this, and this is it's such, I think the reason for this is because it's such an important story for the grounding of Christian theology, really. Right? Like Paul says that by one man sin entered into the world. And with sin came death. Like, his reading of this story is what Christianity has inherited, but that's not what the story is about. This is Paul reading his own worldview into the story, and it's just so important to see it for what it is, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where Paul is. I think I said this last time. It seems that a lot of the Bible is making apologies, like an apologetics for other parts of the Bible, but the New Testament seems very much like that. It seems to like something that I am going to bring up to Michael Kona. I'm so grateful he's coming on the stream because I really love having conversations with Christians about this stuff, and I think I can do it respectfully. But he really harps on about the resurrection of Jesus and how it's like it's factual and all these things, and he's written books on it, of course. But the thing that gets me is none of the disciples were expecting Jesus to like resurrect. They're all surprised when they see him. Like they're all like it's all a big like, oh my gosh. They have to later read into the Old Testament scriptures to work that out. Like none of them are like, oh, Jesus is on the cross, all good. He's gonna be back in 3 days. They're not already thinking that. It's only when they rewrite or not rewrite, but reinterpret the Old Testament. And I think you lose. In my perspective of all this, these are just mythologies, ideas, perspectives, and people are kind of building off narratives around them to kind of make sense of the world. Sometimes they might be for entertainment, sometimes they might be to explain something. But the thing that doesn't really sit right well with me is that Genesis 1 is designed to explain the origins of the universe. One, because it's so wrong, like it's so blatantly wrong. Like if there is a God, like there's no way God's hand could be in that, unless you then deny all of science and observable evidence. But
and that's the thing people do
that. Yeah, and but it seems more it's more interesting, and it makes more sense to me that there was more going on than just let's come up with a narrative to explain our, like it's like, well, let's put our own spin on things. Like let's try to make a point. Let's make a polemic against Mesopotamian society. We're our own group. I think weren't correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of when Genesis was thought to be written, wasn't it during the time when the Israelites were in captivity by the Babylonians, or roughly around that time?
Yes. Is that true? Sorry, I got distracted. Yeah. So I tend to think, and other scholars tend to think, that there are bits and pieces from the stories of Genesis which are very ancient, right? But the composition that we have now is definitely post-Babylonian. It might be really late, actually. Like I think the book of Genesis may not have been what we have now, or even something that closely resembled it. Didn't appear maybe until even like 300 BCE. Like there's lots of stuff in here that's super late. This might be one of how early. Depends on what you're talking about. Like there's parts of it. So for example, Genesis 49 is a poetical blessing delivered by Jacob to his sons. It's a poem about the 12 tribes, which probably dates to the Iron Age sometime. So before like 600 or 700, I would say. So like that's one part of it that's like really old, and it's cobbled together from all these little bits, right? Like the story of Joseph is probably like a standalone tale, like a story all on its own that existed apart from any of the other stories about Jacob and Isaac and Abraham and all that. And then there's other pieces too. One of the things I made a video about this, the story of the Tower of Babel, I think, was very clearly written during the Babylonian exile. and was actually about stuff that was happening in Babylon. One of the things that was happening in Babylon at the time of the exile, or well, I should say, more so between the first captivity, which took place in 597, and the second captivity in 587. So there's Jews living in Babylon during this whole period of time, when Nebuchadnezzar is in the process of renovating this magnificent ziggurat, this towering ziggurat in the center of the city, called the foundation platform of heaven and earth, Etem and Enki. And there's a monument that Nebuchadnezzar erected to this, to his completion of this monument, of this temple. And when you read it next to the story of the Tower of Babel, you're like, oh wow, like they sound really similar. Like it sounds really similar. And then there's things like, oftentimes I present, there's this very it feels like a really out of place story, like kind of right in the middle of the story of Joseph. There's this interruption, just before, like right after Joseph gets sold into slavery, and then before the continuation of what happens to him in Egypt. There's like this vignette, all about Judah. It's this story about how he marries a Canaanite woman and has 3 sons, and the first he gives a wife to the first son. The oldest son, Yahweh just hates him, so he kills him. And that's literally what it says. It says Yahweh didn't like this guy, so he killed him. And then the second son, he's given the wife of the first son as part of this levirate marriage tradition, in order to keep your progeny, if you're born, you're born without children, or if you die without having any children to carry on your name. There's this tradition within the Hebrew Bible where your wife is given to your brother, and he has sex with her, and whatever she bears becomes like your child posthumously, to carry on your name, right? This is a levirate marriage. So
this is how apologists get around the different genealogies of
it's so stupid, right?
Rolled my eyes as hard as possible.
So in this story of in Genesis 38, Judah's second son, he is given the wife of his dead brother, but he refuses to fulfill his levirate marriage vow. It says, he spilled a seed on the ground, which many readers take to mean you shouldn't masturbate, but that's not what it means. It's about wasting. You're not fulfilling your duty by basically impregnating your brother's wife. Ew. And God's angry with him and kills him. And then there's the third son, who's really young, and Judah says, well, he's too young to marry this woman, so I will wait. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but it's this interesting story, and it has a number of very intriguing literary parallels with the story of the succession, what's called the succession narrative in 2 Samuel chapter 9 through, or sorry, 2 Samuel chapter 9 through 1 Kings chapter 2. The story of the sons of David as they're competing for the throne in David's old age, right? I think that's a story that originated, as like a polemic against, the stuff that was taking place in the House of David. It's a really, really interesting social critique of these royal foibles. So all that to say, there's elements within Genesis that I think you can date quite a bit earlier. But you're right. Like, the book as we have it now was put together much later, well after the Babylonian exile, I think, like well after. Maybe it might be one of the more recent books of the entire Hebrew Bible, right up there with things like Daniel and some of the later prophecies. So anyways, yeah. So yeah, Genesis is late.
I was laughing before because the only reason I know what the ziggurat is from playing Civilization 6.
Oh, good. Video games are good for something.
Yeah, I used to always play as Hammurabi and all that. I'm gonna play video games to de-stress sometimes. I love video games. Nice. What I was going to ask you just before we wrap up, and if anyone's got any super chats,
listen. I actually, so I have a little bit more. Can I just finish?
Oh yeah. No, sorry. Yeah.
Because I've got this little bit.
This is what I mean by not having notes. I have no idea.
Yeah, you don't. Right. Yeah. You have no idea what's happening. So I don't have any slides for this. So I'm just gonna. And this is like the end of the story, right? So after all this, like, what is this story about? We talked a little bit about this. It says some different things about good and evil. Some have suggested it has something to do with the origin of sin in the fallen state of the world. Apart from all these things, Genesis 2 and 3 creation myth was first an ideological tale about the nature of the difficulties of life and the peculiarities of sex, from the hardships of agrarian living off the unforgiving soil, its thorns and the hazards of snakes, to the shame that accompanies nakedness and the instinct to cover it, to the reason why childbirth is so difficult. But as I finish up, I think it's worth reflecting on this story from another angle, and more in conversation with something else going on in the early parts of Genesis. The story concludes with the following declaration made by Yahweh. This is from chapter 3, verses 22 to 20. Adam has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. So what prevents that he might stretch his hand and take also from the tree of life, eat, and live forever? So Yahweh God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from where he was taken. He drove out the Adam and stationed on the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming, whirling sword to guard the way of the tree of life. So the temptation for many will be to see in Yahweh's response a reactionary attempt to deal with an imminent threat. The man knows too much. And for him to gain immortality will somehow jeopardize the residents of the Garden of God. The fearsome, gigantic winged bovine beasts with human faces, that's what the cherubim are, the cherubim. These creatures that Yahweh stations at the entrance of the garden certainly conveys a strong sense that you are not welcome here. And I think the instinct is to respond by thinking, what a selfish God, small-minded, petulant, determined to keep his creations under his thumb. I think these instinctual dismissals may detract, though, from how this story connects with the drama that follows. So as I briefly noted earlier, I've hinted at this throughout, this early layer in Genesis seems to have been written as a polemic against urbanization, this possible reflecting an historical reality in mass migration away from Canaanite city-states at the end of the Bronze Age. But scholars like Ronald Handel and David Carr have pretty convincingly shown also that the so-called primeval history of Genesis 2 to 11 was constructed in direct response to the celebration of civilization and city planning in the Epic of Gilgamesh. As Handel puts it, the J narrative of the primeval humanity appropriates the Mesopotamian and Eastern setting of this transformation from nature to culture, bracketed on one side by the natural innocence of life in the Garden of Eden, and on the other side by the building of Babylon, the most glorious of Mesopotamian cities. But the older Mesopotamian theme of the ascent of humans from nature to culture is complicated to a degree, subverted in the Israelite narrative sequence. Josh Bowen, in his book, draws our attention back to the opening and closing lines of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which are nearly identical in their tribute to the city of Uruk. It says this: "Go up, walk on the ramparts of Uruk, inspect the base terrace, examine its brickworks. If the brickwork is not of burnt brick, and if the 7 wise ones laid not its foundation, 1 sar is city, 1 sar orchard, 1 sar margin land. Further, the precinct of the temple of Ishtar, 3 sar, and the precinct comprise Uruk." So for the author of the epic, the prevailing message is that Gilgamesh's tireless pursuit of immortality is found in the eternal city, in Uruk. But then Josh also points out the antithesis that belies the narrative in Genesis. In Genesis 1 to 11, the arc of the story begins with humanity innocent and in communion with God, and ends with them attempting to build a city, as Hendel noted, in the very city of Babylon, no less. The collaborative project of humanity would be considered a phenomenal achievement today. However, in the eyes of the biblical author, this was antithetical to God's command to spread out. Thus, by moving the story to its climax in Babylon, it seems as though the writer is providing a counter-narrative to the Mesopotamian concept of civilization. So an important aspect of this critique of the city is in the elevation of the pastoralists, the nomads and the farmers in the Judean highlands. Yes, on the one hand, their lot is drudgery of toil just to get by. Thorn and thistle, it shall sprout for you. But you will eat the grain of the field by the sweat of your face. You shall eat bread. That's Genesis 3, 18 to 19. The message here is that living off the land is difficult, but it is also what man is made for. Yahweh formed the Adam from the earth, and he enslaved him to the cultivation and upkeep of the landscaped urban garden of God. But now that the man and his woman have their eyes open, now that they are like gods, they are no longer suited to this task. See now, the Adam has become like one of us, knowing good and bad. So what prevents that he might stretch his hand and take from the tree of life, eat, and live forever? In verse 22. So I take this to mean that while the man now possesses godlike insight, he is not yet a god, but that in obtaining immortality by eating of the tree of life, he will then no longer be in the station of a garden slave. He will be a god. The man's purpose must be realized, but he is no longer fit to do so in this immortal realm. And this reminds me of another Akkadian creation story called Adapa and the South Wind. Adapa is a servant of the god Ea, who runs afoul of the great god Anu and is summoned to appear in heaven before him. Ea advises Adapa about what will happen. He says, "When they offer you the bread of death, you shall not eat. When they offer you water of death, you shall not drink. When they offer you a garment, put it on. When they offer you oil, anoint yourself. This advice that I have given you, neglect not. The words that I have spoken to you, hold fast." But when Adapa stands before Anu, he is rather offered bread and water, not of death, of life. However, in devoted obedience to Ea, he abstains and Anu laughs at him. "Come now, Adapa, why did you neither eat or drink? You shall not have life. Ah, perverse mankind." Ea's trickery could be seen as malicious, but for Ea, Adapa is intelligently designed. Wide understanding he has perfected for him to disclose the designs of the land. To him he is given wisdom, eternal life he had not given him. In those days, in those years, the sage from Enkidu, Ea, created him as the model of man. The sage, his command, no one can vitiate. The capable, the most wise among the Anuki is he. The blameless, the clean of hands, the ointment priest, observer of rites. With the bakers he does the baking. With the bakers of Enkidu he does the baking. Bread and water for Enkidu daily he provides. With his clean hands he arranges the offering table. Without him, the table cannot be cleared. He steers the ship. He does the prescribed fishing for Enkidu. Without him, the table cannot be cleared. Adapa's wisdom has perfectly suited him to the task of looking after Enkidu. He is the model of man. He is indispensable to Ea. I think this helps to flesh out some of the detail in Genesis 2 to 3. The Adam was created for the earth, not the city. More specifically, he was created to cultivate and look after the garden of God. When this station is jeopardized by his acquisition of knowledge, like a god, he can no longer stay in the garden. The man and the woman are banished, but they are also emancipated, free from slavery to the garden. They become their own masters, slaves to their own destiny. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread. There's a nobility in the labor of keeping your family alive. The task of survival in the hill country, outside of the decadent Canaanite cities, can be unpleasant. It's unforgiving. It's work. But at least the sons of Adam are free. So that, I think, is a key aspect of what's happening in this story.
Someone said, I very much enjoy Kip's reading voice, and I have to agree.
Nice. Oh, cool.
Do you think you'll do an audible version of the book?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to do... I know Josh likes to get Seth Sanders to do his, but I would worry that if I got someone else to do it, that they wouldn't put the emphasis in the right places.
I think
what I'm trying to communicate,
right?
Well,
people like your voice, so I mean, no one doesn't like Seth's voice, but I think I always prefer hearing from the original author. Just if anyone's got any super chats, any other super chats, just let us know. Well, start doing it now. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, Kip, for coming on.
Yeah,
it's always great. Always great fun. I also want to, before we get to super chats, I wanted to shout out the archbishops of Patreon of Deep Drinks, Jason Rollins, Matthew Monga, Digital Hammurabi, and Skeptics and Scoundrels. Eric, thank you so much for your
all
support.
those people.
And of course the bishops and everyone else who supports this channel, Deep Drinks. We really appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here today, of course, all of this is available in Dr. Kip's course, which I've spammed in your chat, Kip. It's linked in my chat. It's linked in the description. If you join the course, you get everything you see here today and more. Of course, also, Kip, can you tell us what's coming up on your channel?
Well, Josh and I are getting back to reading Hebrew on Thursday. And so we just finished Jeremiah chapter 1, which was fun. And after the discussion, the slavery discussion that we had last week with Trent Horn and Gavin Ortland, I'm sorry, it was painful, wasn't it? It made you smash.
I could only like a few minutes. Like, I don't know how you did it. Like, can give us I couldn't even watch it all. Look, where is it? Oh, it says I watched it all.
So there's a couple there. Shoot, let me pull this down. I can probably see. Yeah, it's the one on the far right.
Because
we did
I just don't see. Can you just tell me what were the answers to this? Like, was it a nice? Like, let me guess. Was it a nice kind of slavery, or they weren't actually the words for slavery, or where do you get your morality from? Like, what avenue did they pursue in that?
I think there was a little bit of all of that in there. I was happy though that, like, I mean, I go into these things with very, very low expectations. So when you go in with low expectations, you're never that disappointed. So I was happy that it felt to me like there was some admittance on their part. Is that a word? Admittance. There was admission. There was some admission on their part. Maybe this stuff is stronger than I thought. There's some admission on their part that that there was permanent slavery in the recommended in the Bible. Now, and I was happy about that. So, like,
that's good.
Baby steps, right? It still was frustrating as hell, but you know,
I just honestly, like, I was very naive, but the episode that we did on,
I'm sorry.
deep
Did
drinks,
you watch the, like, you said you watched a little bit of it?
I can't remember how much. It's funny because last time you were on, I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and then
right.
on this side, and then this literally a few days ago, I had the other side taken out. So it's like so it was around the same time. So I might have watched this but fallen asleep. But definitely that's probably why it's all
so close. Very close to the beginning, Vishanti actually posted a question in the super chats there. Yeah, there it is. You can see it. Does the panel at least agree that slavery is wrong or immoral? And even though we were not taking super chats or asking audience questions, I thought that was an important one. And I thought this was a slam dunk, David. Like, when I posed the question, my expectation was kind of like, yeah, we're hearing this discussion about slavery, and like, we can all agree, right, that slavery is wrong, right? Right?
But they won't.
No, like, no, and it's shocking. Like, it's just it's Maya Atkinson here. Look, I can do this too.
Hey,
depends on what your definition is. So yeah. So the other one there, David, if you go back to my catalog, something else, you will enjoy this much more. The black and white one there, Slavery Examined.
Oh yeah.
So last night,
Vishanti's on.
Yeah, there she is, cool. And she did amazing. So Derek and Josh and I sat down with Vishanti and with Pat Lowinger from Discovering Ancient History with Pat Lowinger. And they gave us some thoughtful, a really nice thoughtful critique while I drank a hazy IPA.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Pat, because he just said a second ago, I wonder if he's still here. Shit, too many beers. Now I'm getting sleepy. So I wonder if he's actually still, he's left the, fallen asleep.
Pat's like older than I am, so he's off to bed. So yeah, but that was, people should watch that. It was a very nice, chat that we had afterwards. I really appreciated what Vishanti and Pat brought to our discussion, and they provided a lot of what they saw and what frustrated them and what they thought we could have done better or maybe should have done differently, right? And that's honestly, like, there are things that it's crazy because there's things that they brought up in that discussion we had yesterday that I didn't even notice in the moment, like, of the debate, right? And so it's hard.
Yeah. I've got such a low tolerance for. I can watch this. I think I don't think I could watch I have such a low tolerance for just apologetic nonsense at the moment. Like, I'm done. Like, or I'm done with the conspiracy theories. I'm done with, like, especially like, like all the stuff that's getting talked about.
The wind was blowing in Vishanti's hair through the stream there. I thought it was I thought it was like a photo shoot. It was pretty cool. It was
like well, so and we have Diablo Critics coming up, don't we? When's the next episode?
It's Father's Day.
I'm only asking because I have to get up at 4 a.m. for it.
Yeah. It's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, David. Oh no, it won't be Father's Day for you, and it's probably not Father's Day in Australia, and you probably have no idea when Father's Day is because you're in Australia. So it's the second Sunday of June. So it's
the first Sunday in a few days.
No, second Sunday of June.
Oh, second Sunday.
So it's like 2 weeks away still, almost.
Okay. Well, that'll be streamed obviously on everyone's channel.
It's the only thing on YouTube that day.
Oh, awesome!
We've blocked off the entire platform.
Everyone from your channel should come and subscribe to Deep Drinks, as well as everyone from Deep Drinks should come subscribe to Kip.
Get on it.
And because especially if you want to come over and watch me philosophically mud wrestle Michael Kona here, which I will do. But also what I was going to say about these are all the sick episodes I've done, but the thing that bothers me about the slavery panel, right? I mean, the slavery conversation that's still happening is I thought this one resolved it. I thought we had it was what 3.5 hours. I gave this,
and we did two.
And we did two. And there's a link to literally a panel. Let me just open this one. There's a link to PDF. Literally all the arguments with references and all of the slavery apologetics and their claims are all like categorized. Like you can go through this and just be like, oh, this is what they said here. This is when it was like taken in case they delete clips, and this is our response. And like this was pages and pages and pages of just of well formatted notes. Incredibly thankful to Tib Vander Wint. I think that's how you, but Tib, member of the Discord, who really helped with this. But 29 pages of resources and catalogs. Like to me, the issue is so done. Like it's so done. Anyway,
can I mention a couple other things that are coming up? Not on my channel, but I'm going to be on Critical Faculty on Friday.
Oh, cool.
And then next week, I'm pretty excited about this. I am going to be appearing with Chrissy Hansen on Aaron Ra's channel to talk about Jesus mythicism, because my friend Lawrence over at Milwaukee Atheist sent me a text one day and said, "Hey, would you come and do something about Jesus mythicism on Aaron's channel, because it feels like a lot of people over there really need this information."
Oh man.
So that'll be fun. And Chrissy is awesome.
Yeah. People remember Chrissy. She's been on Deep Drinks before as well. So first channel is a fellow Australian, Critical Faculty. Go over to Critical Faculty, subscribe. Yeah. Incredible stuff. Great friend. And of course, everyone should know the GOAT, Aaron Ra, who's just I really appreciate that Aaron Ra.
Did he just do something recently on Matt Slick?
Oh, I think I saw that.
Or is that old?
Yeah. He's just here 16 hours ago. It's I really like that he's it's like in a way he's like he's not making these hugely like produced like videos anymore. He's nailed them. Like the foundational falsehoods of creationism. That's 16 years old or something now, but it's great. The how X disproves Noah's Ark. Fantastic, absolutely great series. Especially the paleontology one for me is just phenomenal. But I love now you're just getting on and just like addressing things just like live. I love that. I think it's really, really cool. It's more casual. And anyway, let's get some super chats.
All right.
And we have the first one. We put it by Hillman 6 months ago. We've talked about that one already. And we have a pseudo super chat. Fiery Serpent, a reference to Guinea worm disease. Is this another Hillman thing?
I don't know.
But infiltrating its way into
I don't know, maybe
conversations.
I have no idea. I think I just think it's all about sex, people.
Oh well, most things in life are, turns out. But thank you so much, the Masturbator, for the $2 super chat, and thank you everyone else for checking out this channel. Make sure you subscribe and all that good stuff. And I guess we'll see everyone in a few days for the Michael Kona. I'll call it a debate, but I'm going to be friendly.
Be nice.
See you later. I will. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.